PhD program in the country.
Pretty good track
And
program too.
yeah, it's a really well-known program. It's a Research One institution. So I was hazed by the best. I can't just say trained. I was
Hazed by the
academically hazed and brutalized for many years, actually 3 years. So I've been fortunately, and since then I've dedicated my career to household finance or personal finance, as we may call it. And this recession really shaped my view on the psychology of money, because before it and going through, I moved to the U.S. when I was pretty young. You have to learn to manage budgets, run a household, make a dollar stretch. I never really understood what my parents meant until then. But going through that recession, oh man, that was mind blowing. So I've dedicated my life to training financial advisors, future financial advisors all over the country. I've been an academic for 10 years. I've published papers, I've written books, I've given presentations all over the world. And I've even taught in China, right? I was a adjunct professor at Shanghai Normal University a couple of times. So, hey, look, when I was asked to do this show, my whole goal was, okay, how can I give back to my country? And this is definitely one way in which to do so. What a better platform than one of the best radio stations in the entire Caribbean, right? So what I want out of this show is to help to increase the financial knowledge of the country at large. I understand there was a program before. Admittedly, I never listened. But we want to change the dynamic here, right? I want this show to really be comprehensive, informative, but chill and relax, right? I don't want it to be stuffy. That's why I'm in here in a t-shirt. I don't want to walk up in here in a suit or anything, because money is already taboo enough, which is exactly around this whole psychology of money and our money personality. So the goal is to create a public that's more financially literate, because look, if we don't plan for money, money will plan for us, right? That's just the reality of it. So just to define what we're going to talk about, usually, it's within the scope of me trying to help to create a financially literate public. And by that I mean a general public that has the knowledge and know the ability to apply that knowledge to navigate within our economy. And we'll realize that our economy is just not St. Kitts and Nevis. It's not just OECS. It's not just CARICOM. It's the entire world. And so financial literacy specifically is a form of human capital, something we were born with, something that has unmatched potential, but in this case, extremely specific to personal finance. And how I view the world is very simple. I view it from the personal finance world, 4 basics, 4 broad areas: financial basics, borrowing, investing, and protection. And for the entire course of this show, for however long I do it, we're going to focus within those 4 broad areas: financial basics, borrowing, investing, protection. Maybe not in the sequential order, but definitely across those broad areas. All right. So the first thing I really want to talk about is the psychology of money. And by definition, the psychology of money is really, the study of how our behavior or how we behave as people with money. Now, I've given enough presentations for people to tell me, well, Doc, I don't have money, so therefore I have no psychology about money. But the reality is we all have had some exposure to money. And our success with money isn't just about knowledge, right? It's not just about knowledge, not just about IQ. It's not just about how good we are in math. I have some of my students, like I'm a professor in the US, and I have students tell me, hey, we're not great with math. And in fact, my current job, when I was interviewed, they told me, how can you minimize math for our students so they could conceptually understand? And that was actually easy to do, because when we have conversations about money, and this is what I teach money, I teach managing money, I teach financial advice, it's about behavior. It's about behavior and how everyone is prone to behave and how they were socialized as it relates to money. How a black household is socialized is very different than how a white household is socialized, even if they lived on the same street. There's enough research to show that. So psychology of money is extremely important to understand. And that's something that we as a general public really need to delve deep into and talk about money. All right. And so I guess the format for the show, we're going to introduce the topic like I'm doing now. Then we'll have a deeper conversation And hopefully we'll open the lines if people have questions. Don't have to necessarily be about the topic, but I'll try my best to tie it back into the topic and try to offer some money tips and hacks and success stories if I found any, and then wrap up and introduce the next section.
The thing, I like the approach. I like the psychology of money approach because I think I may have said this to you last week. One of the concerns I've always had about our money culture here is that because of because of starting on the back foot, our people, you find that things like investment and
Mm-hmm.
all these arcane things that let's say the colonizers do to create generational wealth and even just create day-to-day wealth. These are things we don't know about, and I think that's one of the things where our psychology needs to change so that we can start looking at some of these arcane things become um, everyday considerations rather than what's this stuff about treasury bills
Yeah,
and bonds and
man,
you know.
you're absolutely correct, man. You see, we've all gone through the same education, right? We've gone through, I think, primary school is what, 6, 7 years, 2 years of junior high or middle school, whatever we call it now, 3 years of high school, then 2 more years of CFB, and never once do we actually have a financial education class, right? So we expect the students to go from fifth form, those who choose not to go to CFB and work, to now be responsible managers of money. And that's just setting people up for failure. And that's why wherever I go present, like I was just in Grenada, and one day when we were talking about, a consulting gig with the government there, when I was talking about, okay, what topics should we talk about? For me, money personality, because I didn't know that was a thing, right? I actually had an MBA before anybody ever mentioned any of this. And these are things that would have helped me to avoid and navigate some mistakes that I obviously made throughout my life, not just me, that I saw friends make and even some family members make. And because no one emphasized how important it was to manage money and understand the management of money. But it's all about psychology. We grew up hearing things like, money don't grow on trees. I ain't got no money, don't ask me for nothing. We've created an atmosphere where the conversation is taboo, where children are afraid to even talk to this day, And we need to change that. We really need to change that if we're going to be successful. Because the thing is that you said, James, that's absolutely correct. And one thing that we're going to get into in a couple of weeks, like investing. And we don't talk about it enough. Right? Inflation, and saying it's a news, and inflation basically means the change in prices year over year. So imagine walking into any supermarket here, you buy a basket of goods, you go to the cash register, you pay $100, you go back, it should be a year, but from what I see on social media, you go back in 2 weeks, the same basket of goods in some cases is 20% more expensive. So inflation here, I think, is really in the double digits. If you were to ask ECCB, they'll tell you it's more in power within the US. So if we were to go with that, we've been averaging about 7 to 8% for a while, right? So meaning every year our money gets 7 to 8% less value. That's why it's become so important for conversations like investing, right? So, and understanding how the ways in which psychology affects our money becomes even that much more important. So we really want to push this whole notion of understanding our money personality. So it's a presentation I give every time I can. Because you see, our money personality represents that gut instinct that we have. You know, what the gut tells us may be wrong versus what we know it's right. So knowing our money personality really gives us an idea about where our instincts may lead. It might, because I'll give you an example, right? The best example I could think. During the 2008 financial crisis, when I was jobless, really couldn't find anything, it was a really hard time. The stock market had plunged. It was at all-time lows. They've just lost about 40% of value at the bottom of it. And I remember Citibank, I'll never forget, Citibank was trading at like $1.14 a share. Today, Citibank is over $50, if not 55. That would have been a significant increase. But no one ever taught me about investing. I didn't know that was a thing, right? Unless you go to university and you study it, you don't know it's a thing. And even if somebody told you, never told you how to do it, right? So that's also something that we want to change. So our money personality in general, though, is really affected by or influenced by our motivations, which are the internal characteristics that really affect our money behavior, how we were socialized, the religion that we're in. In some cultures, they don't believe in interest rates. In some cultures, they don't believe in loans. They come together as a pool. I'm talking about the Indians, right? They pool their resources, they help each other, they invest in each other. And we look at black people in general and realize we have a completely different attitude towards money, where basically you see one have it and how dare they get money. So we all have that crab in the barrel mentality. But we need to move beyond that as a society to be successful.
So we have a problematic money personality.
Oh, it's systemic, right? It's systemic, it's systematic, it's almost cultural. I don't understand. I've had the ability to teach in different cultures, and you could really see how the motivations are different, and the emphasis or the importance we place on certain things versus others. It's also dependent on what we call our time orientation. Our money personality focuses and depends on how we view the future, how we view the present. And there's no right or wrong answer here. We have different types of people. Some people are future-oriented, some people are present-oriented. Some people likes to think about tomorrow, others just focus on today. And again, it goes back to those motivations. I had a friend that got in a car accident and almost lost his life. And it honestly changed his time orientation, where he started to focus on the now and think less about the future. So there's no right or wrong answer. But to tell if somebody is future-oriented or present-oriented, you tend to think along the lines of, again, behavior. Do you go to the supermarket and read nutrition labels? Do you go to the gym? How often do you work out? Do you eat healthy? Do you decide to not just go to university, but maybe invest in a training or some sort of course, versus somebody that just spends and wants to go to every party and every event and so on? So that's a distinction to make. And then it also depends on our risk tolerance, our financial risk orientation. How willing are you or able are you to tolerate financial risk? If you're in the stock market and the stock falls 10, 20, 30%, will you stay invested? Or will you run away after 5% decreases? There's certainly different types of people here. But these three things together really dig into our money personality, and it would actually allow us to separate people into different subcategories, right? You could look at spenders versus savers. You could look at the accounting spender model in couples. You could look at safety versus somebody that's more status-oriented, somebody that wants to demonstrate wealth. And obviously, how we talk to people in our households, how you talk to your family, how you talk to your childhood. So the psychology of money affects our decisions, but understanding where you fall will be so powerful. I want to recommend a book. There's a book that was written, it's called The Psychology of Money, and it was written by Morgan Housel, and it's one of the best-selling books, and in fact, it's absolutely free on Kindle, if any of you have Kindle or Audible account. And the book is around 20 chapters, but it's 20 important chapters that focuses on some general key ideas. And as we delve deeper in the conversation, I'll just hone in on some of these key ideas and just share some opinions on it as well. The book starts out by really saying that no one is crazy as it regards to money. Sometimes we look at people and we say, hey, why are they doing this to their money? Why are they doing that? Why are they spending on this? Why are they buying that? But we all have a preference. No one is crazy. And having a preference that's different from somebody else's is okay. It doesn't matter whether the money is yours or you've borrowed it from someone. How we use it, the decisions we make become that much more important. So no one is crazy. We all make decisions. And the crazy thing is that what makes sense to us might not make sense to somebody else. So the author really went to lengths in trying to explain that most of our financial decisions are based on our beliefs, again, our motivations. All right? Your religion affects the decisions that you make. Your community groups that you grow up around affects the decisions that you make. All right? And we want to move past the generalization and realize that we're all uniquely different and we all have to navigate in our exact own way. So how do we decide who is right or wrong when it comes to that? There's no one absolute answer for how we deal with money. In fact, I had a wealth management firm that I started with a couple classmates of mine like 6 years ago. And we would be in front of potential clients. And let's say we're talking about one particular strategy or the other. We will both have different approaches to get to the answer. And we will literally have these conversations in front of the client. And some people may view that as chaotic. But what that demonstrated is that we have different paths to get to the same conclusion. So we're going to find the best way, the best alternative, the best opportunity cost for that client. You see, it takes self-awareness. It takes self-awareness and it takes understanding of what we really want to accomplish. And if you put two finance experts together, we may come to very different conclusions. If I was to have a guest in here, their view on something might be completely different to mine. It's like politics, right? Both the current opposition and the current government wants the best for the country. I don't think anybody would argue that, but just have a different way to get there. So no one is crazy. We're just a little bit uniquely different, all right? Another idea the book really talks about is recognizing the role of both luck and risk in life. Jamster, do you think Bill Gates is a lucky man?
No. Well, no. I would say no. He just happened to be at around at the right time.
So he was around at the right time, and he chose to take a risk that somebody else may
That
not.
worked. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's go a little bit local. Do you think some of the wealthiest in St. Kitts, let's say like the Amories, and we hear a lot about Grant and so, but I mean he has two KFCs, right? Is that luck? Are they where they are because of luck?
No, circumstances.
Circumstances and risk taken in life. You see, and this was an epiphany for me. Because, oh man, we always grew up saying, oh, they're so lucky for having this, they're so lucky for having that. But the thing is, we really don't know how they got there, right? We really don't know how they got there. So we think that they got successful in some cases only because, and then we're told, oh, you have to really just work hard. If you go work hard, you could accomplish anything. Nah, man. Sometimes a little bit of luck too.
But in fact, yeah, of course, there's the pie chart as far as that the circumstances. There'd probably be a 10-15% slice that would be luck. But one of the things I always said, and I'm glad you're talking about risk now, is that I've always realized that generally, you might not agree with me, but would you say that us as a culture and a society that we are risk averse?
Very much so. We are very much risk averse.
That's what I thought.
And let me say this: we're financially risk averse. Because, and I had this conversation with a young woman. She's from St. Kitts. She's a business owner in the U.S. And she's done some amazing things. She's done some things I would never do. She was in the military, and she had some experiences there that we could only fathom or watch on Netflix, right? So, but then, so for me, she is risky. She's a risky individual. In her mind, she's not, right? In her mind. So I had to explain to her that sometimes it's not that we're afraid to take risk, we're afraid to lose, right? So even when you take a risk and you make $1, you feel, okay, man, you start that little business on the side, you go, you buy something, you flip it, or you decide to go in real estate, you got your first tenants and so on. Sometimes, oh man, just lost my train of thought. It's not, it's the risk. You take risks. So we go to university, we leave our country, leave our homes, you go to Taiwan, you go to Cuba. You're not sure what's going to happen, all right? So it's not that we're afraid of risk, but sometimes we're afraid of losing. After I've spent all this money, what if it doesn't work? So that makes us not do anything. Now, if Bill Gates had that mentality, we wouldn't have Windows computers.
Exactly. But the other thing is that I think our culture doesn't celebrate and doesn't celebrate failure, whereas in you get it in North America, the culture is, I mean, you have these serial entrepreneurs who've tried things that have failed, but they keep trying.
They keep trying.
Whereas here, that isn't celebrated.
Yeah.
People would laugh at you.
Yeah.
It's like you fail. It's like a capital offense.
It goes back to culture,
You know?
right? It's that part of the culture where it's how success was defined to us. Success was defined as safe. Go be a doctor, go be a lawyer. Seldomly did you ever hear about go be a business person. Unless you did principles of business, shout out to my principles of business teacher and principles of accounting, that really sort of shifted. Because I wanted to be a medical doctor, actually. I couldn't stand chemistry, went for one day. But anyway, if everybody was to take a mandatory, let's say, class, like a financial education class that exposed them to money topics, we'd be better off as a society. Because the reality is, you can't afford to not invest. We can't afford to not invest. And even recently, since being here, I met this lady, magnificent lady. I was thoroughly impressed by her. But she was doing something that to me was risky. She was building a house out of pocket. And for me, that is ultimately risky. Because for 4 or 5%, unless that, if you're gonna spend that kind of money, 100,000, 200,000 out of pocket on a house, for example, and when the cost of borrowing that money is only 4 or 5%, you could probably do more with that $200,000 in cash. If you could make more than 4 or 5% a year as a return, right, you've literally just messed up an opportunity. The opportunity cost there is negative.
You raise an interesting point because I have friends who I know, for example, like they'll take a loan and then they'll tell me, boy, I mean, I paid 2, 3 times, 4 times the amount, and I mean, it was supposed to be 5 years, and I paid off that in 18 months, or I paid off that in a year. Is that advisable?
It depends, right? It depends. That's the universal answer, everybody. It depends, right? The more older we get, crap is complicated. So, everything depends. But, the reality is...
So you're saying with the house thing, like that example you just used, you're saying that there might be cases where that might not be the best thing to do?
If we were living in a society where we had no option to other opportunity costs for our money, it would be completely fine, right? But we're taught that debt is bad. We're taught that going into debt is bad.
So is that a semi-rational what do I call it?
Decision?
A semi-rational maxim that we've been taught that debt is bad?
Yeah. Well, it's semi because it's not fully explained. No, debt could be bad, right? And even with government, for example, no government debt is bad as long as it's productive. No household debt on the personal side is bad as long as it's productive. Where debt becomes bad, and this is controversial. Oh man, I can't say it.
I see what you're saying.
But
we're taught debt is bad without sufficient context of what that debt is.
Exactly. If the thing that you're buying outlives the life of the loan, how could it be bad, right? So if I go get a mortgage, is the house going to be destroyed in 30 years? Well, we hope not, as long as it's built properly and with natural disasters and stuff, right? But then that's why you have insurance, right, to provide and protect against that loss. But how could it be bad? Now, if we go buy something that we take 5 years to pay for and you used it in 24 hours, no, that is bad. That's a bad use of debt. But somebody else, to the point earlier, may find that to be completely rational, right? For example, I don't understand people that play mass. I can't fathom that. But same thing, people may not understand why I travel all over the place, right? So everybody has a personal thing there. And that's okay. Sometimes we feel like you ask people, do you want to get rich? They say, no, I just want enough. That's another key idea that came out of the book. Enough is not too little. Humans are weird. we think we're rational, but we're really not rational people, right? We're human beings.
Which is why I asked you if that whole thing that we've been taught about debt being, if it's like a semi-rational thing. Because...
I think it depends on the time frame too, right? We have more options today than somebody that was growing up in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And people ask me what are their investment options as an example. So, okay, let me go back to that point. So I met this lady, and when she told me that, I was like, look, I'm happy for you.
The house thing.
Yeah, the house thing. But don't do that. Like, go out and get a mortgage, right? And I'm like, okay, but, you know, she was like, but, you know, me really want the debt. And so I was like, it's 4%, 5%, right? You give me that $200,000, I could show you where to invest that money to get 12% a year. Let me do this. I think if
Let me read a comment quick. Yeah, it's very short. So he said, one is unlikely to get a 5% mortgage in St. Kitts Nevis. That's what someone said.
Oh, maybe it's gone up now, but my understanding is about 5 to 6% somewhere. It depends on between national and the credit unions. In fact, I say everybody needs to have a credit union account, by the way. It's definitely where you get a much better relationship, a more close, intimate relationship in general than commercial banks. Less intimidating as well. So, you know, if she then comes and she has somebody that could tell her what to do with this $200,000, I think for the year, my portfolio is up around 13%, and that mortgage is 5%, right? And in fact, the net cost of the mortgage, if we were to adjust for inflation, is actually -0. By having a mortgage, once you adjust for inflation, the net cost to somebody is actually negative right now because inflation is higher than the cost of the mortgage. Right? So the reality is, like, we could do a lot more if we understood and realized, had information. Some of the most successful people in the world, the difference is that they have access to information, right? $200,000, that's about $80,000 at a 13% in her first year. Should have made about 12,000 US. That's about 35,000 EC dollars. That's what people make in a year, right? In 1 year. So there are options out there to get into that. So I was saying humans are weird. We want to earn money, but how much do we need actually precisely? People say things like, I want to be comfortable, but that's different for everybody. That could be 5 figures, that could be 6 figures, that could be some people that want 7 figures. People keep going after more and more and more, thinking that just having enough is not enough. It's too little. The truth is, enough is not equal to too little. If your goal is to have enough money, you'll have to stop at some point. Then look at other things far more important. See, money isn't, you don't say money is the root of all evil.
Well, the love of money, that's actually what
the love of
says.
money. Yeah, that's what the scripture says. The scripture says a lot.
Very important.
Yeah.
Very important, you know.
So that pursuit of it, that constant pursuit, like, for example, we have Elon Musk, right? I've watched so many of his interviews. I don't think he even cares that he's rich. I've never got.
You're right. That's the impression.
Yeah,
you get,
he gives the impression. You know, even when he was already a multi-millionaire after he sold PayPal, I don't know, many people didn't realize that he was involved in PayPal. He used to sleep on his friends' couches, right? And yet we get $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, and we want to go buy the most expensive thing to demonstrate wealth.
Yes.
Look at Steve Jobs before he died. What was his? He had a uniform, light ash washed out jeans with a black T-shirt.
Fake. What they call him? A fake turtleneck.
The man died with like $18-20 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, same thing. Now they buy assets, obviously, but they don't show wealth, right? Because they're realizing the money is secondary. What's most important to them is freedom.
Well, you know what you. You're illustrating there our as a people, our money personality, our money psychology, our money culture. Our money culture is about signaling our success in the most ostentatious ways and most wasteful ways, as far as I'm concerned. Because take, for example, you look at how some of the rappers and so on. I mean, you'll go and buy a chain that costs $250,000 rather than buying an old. How about buying an old apartment building and fixing it up? And
that's the thing.
That's where I think.
Was it rapper Gucci Mane who went to jail, and his wife at the time, he left like $2 million in the bank, and she turned it into 20, because instead of buying frivolous stuff, she goes out and she invests in like real estate, she
Yes,
invests
exactly.
in commerce,
Yes.
and that's really it, right? You see, the thing is too, though, and it goes back to one of another idea that came out in the book is that most of us are not aware of compounding.
Compound interest.
Compound interest, right? I call compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. It's sexy as hell. Compound interest is sexier than any woman I've ever seen in any magazine, in any bikini. Compound interest. That's why that can't faze nobody. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And the thing is, and what's disappointing in our society, in St. Kitts Nevis, the Caribbean at large, we're not really taught about it. We're taught exponents in school, but the example we're given is total. It's just numeric.
So how do we weaponize / utilize compound interest?
Ooh, that's a good thing. It's already weaponized against us.
No, but how do we weaponize it?
I know, so we could benefit from
so
it.
that we're not on the business end of that weapon.
Listen, the reality is it goes back to just knowing the system. And it ties back into a question you asked me last week with the bi-monthly payment, for example. And, you know, I was a little hesitant then because I told you I submitted a proposal. I'm admittedly a little salty. Everybody wants to be rejected in their own country. Maybe it's not a rejection. Maybe they just haven't gotten around to it yet. But here's the thing. Everybody is I'll use this as the example. Everybody is worried about the bi-monthly payment, and rightfully so. About 3,000 people, the way in which we're being paid is going to change, right? Government is the biggest employer. I'm imagining about 10% of the population works for government, is paid by government directly or indirectly. So now, that means 90% of the country is already paid in the way that the government is proposing. Right, and not just their recommendation. This is a regional thing, right? It's already going on in Grenada. Started April 15th.
So it's the other islands as well.
Oh yes, very much so. So let's assume though that we're in a household with 2 government employees, and that's all the one time a month payment. I could understand how that's intimidating. It's a psychology, because in that household you may have a husband that sees the world as a glass half empty, and you may have a wife that sees the world as a glass half full. That means one is going to view that first paycheck as, oh, wow, I have money. I don't have to wait 30 days to get money. I'm getting money every 15 days. The other is going to look at it, well, why they take half my money? Or where the rest of my money? You understand? It's a completely different dynamic there. But the implication to your point is now you're able to pay loans and credit facilities that use compound interest to generate profits for financial institutions. Now you could use that against them. Now, okay, you pay twice a month versus one, I'll be honest, negligible change over time. All right, you're going to probably reduce some total interest. But what we really should be doing, if you have a $2,000 mortgage, and this is how we weaponize it or protect ourselves. If you have a $2,000 mortgage, instead of paying $2,000 once a month, or instead of paying $1,000 twice a month, we should be paying $500 weekly. Let's assume that mortgage was 30 years, and we could do the math. If that mortgage was 30 years, you would wipe out by going from 1 payment to 4 payments a month. You're still paying the same $2,000, right? You're not paying any more right now. You're going to wipe out almost 5 years of payments.
Really?
Yeah, compounding. Because we go from, for example, and that's the next thing too. Think about compounding. If you do it at the beginning versus you do it at the end. When a government worker's paid at the end of the month, that's 30 days that the banks have accumulated interest on your loan, right? Now, if you were to pay at the first of the month, that's 30 days that the bank, you've already reduced your principal by a certain amount that the bank now cannot take interest on. See the difference? So now if we were to add to that, and instead of paying once a month at the end, twice a month in the middle or the end, we pay at the beginning of each week, each Monday, $500, $500, $500, $500. The impact will be significant.
Wow.
The impact is going to be significant. In fact, if if the month has 31 days, you may actually pay 5 payments in a couple months, which is going to have even more impact. Right? So that's it, compounding. I'll tell you.
Wow.
We can't afford not to. So if inflation is 6 and 7, 8%, how do we not invest? right? You see, debt and compound interest is all around us. Credit card bills. We're moving towards a cashless society. Whether or not it's crypto or whatever, credit will be involved, right? So a lot of people are using credit cards now, right? We see a lot of events now you could pay with credit cards, no longer the need for cash. And how are credit cards compounded? Daily. The interest on credit cards are accumulated daily. And then you're told to pay a minimum, right? But by paying that minimum, we view minimum payments as endorsements. And I'll get more into this when we talk about credit. It's not an endorsement. It's a minimum. It's a suggestion. Just like in the US during the financial crisis.
And it's a sneaky suggestion.
It is because if people just pay the minimum, the total interest paid over the life would be significant. Now, even if you pay slightly more than the minimum and slightly more frequently than once a month, the impact is going to be significant. That's on the debt side. But so we have to invest, right? We need the ability to invest. Now, some people are going to hate me saying this. Every year, when I look at National Bank's annual AGM, I'm just dumbfounded. Because the argument is, I can't wait to get my dividend so I could pull it out and spend it. Well, if you pull out the dividend, and the dividend is the only return you're getting on investment because the share price has not changed, if you look at the Eastern Caribbean Stock Exchange, which should be a demonstrated example of compound interest, a share price today, and you look a year from now, the price hasn't changed. So, and we make money two ways in investing. You make money on capital appreciation, you make money on dividends, right? So at the AGM for National Bank, TDC, Hansford, all these companies, when they announce their dividends, we shouldn't be taking it out. You should be using that dividend to do what? Buy more. That's how you invest. All right. So right now, I reinvest every dividend that I get. Now, some people can't afford to do that, and I understand. But we can't look at investment as an opportunity to use it now, right? Investment is for the long term. It can't be you let's say you have 10,000 shares that you get $600-700. I understand the temptation to spend. But how then next year you only have $10,000 instead of $10,700 to get further dividends or further accumulation? So compound interest is necessary. We can't not compound. Because if not, by the time we get to retirement, your money is going to be worth nothing.
Let me ask you a question. You just illustrated the fact that maybe our East Caribbean Stock Exchange isn't as dynamic and as...
I'm telling you, it's not dynamic at all.
Yes, okay. So how feasible is it for us here to invest in, let's say, lithium futures and Apple and all that kind of stuff?
No, feasibility question of it, I wouldn't recommend it because those things are complex. You know, there was a young man here, and this is before I went to university, and he had learned about commodity investing. I think he was in tourism, and he met some tourists, and he learned about investing in like wheat. Right, or let's say oranges. So futures, right? And he goes and he went and he found a company in Chicago that they traded on the Mercantile Exchange, etc. And they really set global interest rates. It's the cost of commodities that set global interest rates. And he made a crap ton of money. And he invested all of it. He pulled it out, invested all of it in a local business, and the business didn't survive. Right? He lost probably $200,000. And he got to that point with a minimal investment of about $5,000, right? So $5,000, right? It's understanding markets, but that's if you imagine a pyramid, that's at the top of risk, right up there with cryptocurrency, right up there with foreign exchange investing. No matter what people come tell you, Bitcoin is not that easy to invest in. The volatility will hurt your head. I lost 75% of my crypto portfolio the last couple of years. If you can't afford to lose the dollar, you don't want to be in something volatile. What I would start with locally is, one, getting in the market, understanding that we have to invest. And even in the ECSC, there are some companies, like the electric companies, that pay massive dividends of like 13% yields. All right, that's an incredible return. But beyond the ECSC, there's very little capital appreciation. The market, the one side of the ECSC that I would recommend probably the only side I would recommend is the government investing side, investing in government debt. Every year we have issues of 4 to 5%, 1 year treasury bills, 3-month treasury bills, etc. But
Wanna
we
take
have
a
to
call?
do something. Yeah, sure.
Money Matters. Go ahead, caller.
Hello.
Hi. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. Good morning, Dr. Martin.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I think I'm going to have a talk with you.
I think we met before a couple of years ago. I did a presentation.
And my good friend here. Now, strange enough, I was thinking this when the government said they're giving dividends.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying since our consumption, marginal consumption we talk about, is so high, if it wouldn't have been better for us, for the government to put our dividends into shares in maybe one of their enterprises? That's what I was thinking, right?
Yes, and I don't disagree with you.
They get it tomorrow, it go on music festival, then the complaining and the brokenness continue Monday morning. So rather than just feeding consumption, because that's all that they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
if it won't be a good idea. Now, there is some fear with government treasury bills and so after the 2009 recession, in that people lost 50% of their bonds, or they had the payment extended to 45 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, what do you think about that? Because I have been saying you're giving people dividends, and before they get it, they spend it, and nothing important, but according to me.
Well, yeah, I'll share my opinion. Look,
I'll hang up.
yeah, I'll share my opinion on that, honestly. I'm all for us benefiting from the spoils of the country. I think we could do a lot better than $1,000 a year, especially when we give massive tax holidays to foreigners. We should be able to offer a lot more out of CBI to locals. So I'm not going to knock the fact that they want to give some money back. But that caller is absolutely correct in the sense that what is going to be the use? You see, the dividend payment should be like a stimulus to the economy. And I would love to see the numbers from the last one, right? That what was the impact of the $500 that we paid 6 months ago on the economy? And let me just preface this by saying, GDP, gross domestic product, is a function of consumption, government spending, net exports, taxes, right? So government spending, taxes sit there. And our economy is not fueled purely by consumption. If you compare that to the U.S., 7% of the U.S. economy is based on consumption. I don't think that's true here in St. Kitts. It's actually based on investment that drive our economy. So then by giving the dividend for consumption, it's not going to have the added advantage, I think, in economic growth, which would lead to better circumstances overall. Now, I'm not going to knock that somebody gets the money and decides to spend. They could do whatever they want with it. However, I think the option should have been there. The option should have been there, okay, here's a dividend. Do you want it in cash in your account? Or do you, like the caller suggested, do you want it done in something that's more productive? Let's give people that choice, right? Yes. For example, some scheme. No, I don't know which government enterprise that they would have invested in because I don't know of any government enterprise outside of CBI that's profitable.
No, you said we have a call here, but you said that investments in those foreign markets is complex, but complex is not the same as impossible.
It's not. It's definitely not impossible. And so when we talk about investing as we go along, one of the things I want to expose the callers to is what the options are. We're listening, caller. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Hey, something you said just kind of piqued my interest. I would have done some economics in the past with Lipsia and the gas was concerned. But something you just said, I would like a person like you to explain to the layman of our federation this thing about tax holidays. Because when we say it, we tend to make it like a stigma. When the Caribbean and the economics of the region went down the area of allowing investment by giving tax holidays. But I would like you to explain it for persons to understand why it is done and not for us to see it as a stigma.
Yeah.
If we have reached points where we don't need to do it, then I want you to say that. But I
Okay.
don't want us to make it like a stigma because we the people on the street sometimes we hear it, but we don't understand why it is done.
Okay. No, that's fair. That's fair. So, but that kind of steps away from the conversation of compounding. But real quickly, just to answer the caller, government.
Let me add this so you
Go
can answer
ahead.
this one time. Someone wanted you to explain the difference between interest and yield.
Interest and yield.
Yeah.
So interest. Okay. So so let me do the first
Yeah,
caller.
yeah.
So sometimes a government, country, county, a village, depending on how the place is structured. In our case, our government, they want to incentivize investment, right? Because again, government cannot be the main employer. And so if you have a foreign investor, what does St. Kitts and Nevis has as a product? We have sun, sea, and sand. And we have historical sites that we underutilize in promotion, right? And what does Antigua have? Sun, sea, and sand. What does St. Lucia have? Sun, sea, and sand. The difference now is how do we get them there? What's going to be the cost of labor, right? So if you go down in the Windwards, they don't make as much as us up here in the Leewards. Somebody in St. Vincent does not make the same amount for the same job as somebody in St. Kitts, right? Or Antigua. Somebody in St. Kitts is not making the same amount as somebody in Anguilla. So the cost of labor is different. So the company is coming in, what's going to be my cost of operation? Well, the cost of labor is high, right? And here versus there. So then we have to compete. Okay, well, I know that St. Vincent has cheaper labor. So the government of St. Kitts has to say, well, how can we get you here instead of going there to build? How can we incentivize you? Well, the company might say, well, you know, all these import taxes, it's going to cost us so much to ship things in, right? Can you give us a break on the tax side? And honestly, rationally, it makes sense. Now, do I think that our tax holidays should be 30 years? No, I think they should be 10 years renewable, not guaranteed renewable. Show me what you've done. Show me how you've contributed to the country, right? Because the thing is, most of the profits from foreign direct investment goes overseas. The locals that are hired are not hired usually in the jobs of management, not because we don't have the experience. We have people all over the world in the diaspora with experience, but we're not incentivized to come back, right? So we need to be competitive, and that's why we offer tax holidays. My issue is, though, is that the tax holidays that we seemingly so willingly give to bigger businesses, bigger unproven developers, we don't give to proven businesses here. It's a hurdle. I've been here a week, Jamster, been on island a week, and I go around and I have informal conversations with business owners, and they complain, man, it's so hard to get duty free. It's so much requirement, so many paperwork, and they give us for a year. But you're giving a small business person for a year, but giving it to a bigger developer that apparently has multis of millions of dollars for 30.
Thank you.
Right now, yeah, they might hire 200 people, but that small business is hiring 10 on less of an investment. So imagine if they had more money, more access to capital, what they could do. Right? That's my thing. So it's not a bad, and the caller is right. We don't want to create a stigma in it, but we also need to understand how it is, and we need to show how we should be able to use it for our people
I
better.
gotta say, what you just illustrated, the idiocy is staggering to me. I'm sorry.
It's crazy. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, some of the most active small businesses in the country that I've at least spoken to, and I've seen a lot of young people start to try to do things, and the struggle, like, okay, if you want to be a and this goes back to compounding, because these are investments, right? So we have to take these investments in small business, and one of the riskiest things we could do is invest in a small business.
You want to squeeze in one more?
Yeah, of course.
Caller, okay.
Then
that
I'll get.
person, hold on. Yeah.
So now
Okay,
to
go
your
ahead.
interest
Yeah,
versus yield. Look at interest, for example, from the financial institution perspective. That's the cost of capital. That's the cost of the loan. That's the cost of the money that you may have or you're applying for, right? And when we get to this topic, here's a question I want y'all to ponder for the next couple of weeks. Who do we borrow money from? Who do we borrow money from? All right? Who do we borrow money from? And we can leave that there until we get to that in a couple of weeks. So interest could be that cost. When it comes to investments, interest is also we call interest return, right? What's the return of my investment? What's my capital gain versus my capital loss? A yield looks at let's say, for example, a dividend yield the dividend we expect versus the dividend that we have divided by price, right? And so it's a different calculation method on it. So we tend to talk about dividend yields, which is interest income, and so on. I'm trying not to get too complex and make this into an investments class, but yeah, there is a difference between them, depending on your point of view. So the last thing, well, not the last thing. I don't know much more time. We probably don't have that much.
We're out of time.
I have so my last comment is that getting money is one thing, keeping it is another. Right? The book had so many major takeaways, but you've heard of all these lottery winners that go broke after a few years. It's the dumbest thing ever. You mentioned the word idiocy. It's the dumbest thing ever. Listen, for every $1 million that you have, if you go and just get a government bond, usually it pays around 4 to 5% a year. That's $50,000 a year, right? So imagine getting $100 million, right? How much is that? $4 million a year? You can't live on dude, you were making minimum wage, bro.
Exactly.
How you can't live on $4 million a year? You should never have an issue. Like the whole, but you see, it goes back to a lack of financial education. I'll give you this example of why it's so important and why I came to our government here and asked that we partner on developing curriculum for a financial education class in high school. I went to a predominantly white institution. Right? I studied at Texas Tech, 90% white in the middle of West Texas. The Ku Klux Klan used to recruit on my campus. It's ridiculous, right? So they have money management centers. They have personal finance classes in the core. They're teaching white students how to manage money. But when I went to a poor Hispanic school in the poorest county in America, and I had a course that I developed and I pushed through the core. I actually wrote the curriculum for the state of Texas personal finance class. Mm-hmm. I mean, St. Kitts and Nevis government, you have a citizen that has done great things. What are you doing? Yeah. Come on, get it together.
Thank you.
Anyway, so
don't get me started.
So they know they canceled my class the Friday before it was supposed to start. Had 200 people enrolled in that class. It was for me to teach young Hispanic students how to navigate within the economy, and they canceled the class, right? So we've had a history where intentionally they try to keep black people uneducated about money. Wow. Look, I think we're out of time.
Yeah,
and this is the first episode, and we didn't run through the sections as we needed to, but we're going to get...
Yes, but we have to let them know it's going to be next week, Monday. So Money Matters will be Monday from 10 to 11.
10 to 11
We had to
Monday.
move it yesterday because of the Music Festival press conference. So.
I enjoyed the conversation. Next week, we're going to start on, I think, savings and budgeting, just as a broad topic, and then we're going to test the waters. But look, I'm Dr. Terrence Martin, and what I want to leave you with is it takes financial knowledge to know that you're making financial mistakes. So go easy on yourself.
Well said. This was a great show. And so we're going to be back here next Monday from right after Island Tea, 10 to 11. You're getting a lot of calls. 10 to 11, Money Matters with Dr. Terrence Martin. Doc, have a great day.
Thanks, Shamsa.
Thank you.
On Sunday, 25th June, from 3 p.m.,